So welcome everyone to week 10 of, let me pull it up on Luma, of our Webflow workshop. Last week we took a break because of Easter and now we're back. We have only a few weeks remaining in these workshop sessions. I think maybe two or three, I'd have to check. But in this session today, we're going to be focusing on learning about forms. Um, well, here says form components and reusable elements. I think we did cover style guides, so we probably won't cover that as much in this session, but we can go over how Webflow forms work and also how to use symbols and components, which I also don't think we've covered yet. And then the practical or the homework when you have time is to just focus on the form part. So you can build a form. You can also see how you can use components as well as you're building it. But that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Before we get started, Doreen did share her work. As always, feel free to share your work by email or on WhatsApp if you want me to review either during the session or separately. If you just want me to like message you privately with my feedback, it's a great way to learn and obviously practice your skills. So Doreen was rebuilding. If you remember last session, we did animations, advanced animations, learning how to create web animations in Webflow. This is the page that Dorian was recreating in Webflow. So it has a number of animations. It has this cool rotating one. It has this page scroll animation as well. And overall, just a really cool website, actually. So we're going to go into Doreen's build and see how she was able to recreate this page. So scrolling down, we have the rotate animation, which is here, which is great. So it's great to see that she was able to replicate that. And then as we scroll further, we can see that we have these brand names here that are also animated. Oh yeah, I was gonna say I don't think they were animated in the original, but it is nice that you were able to animate them here because it's a different kind of animation as well. So actually, I am curious, did you use the scroll template, that scroll animation template, or did you make this on your own?
I made it from the scratch.
Okay, that's amazing. That's really good. So this type of animation is really common with like brand logos or just brand names. So it's cool that you're able to add it here. I love that. We scroll further, we can see we have the left right animation that is similar to the site as well. So it's nice we can see this. I actually like that it extends compared to the one here where it doesn't extend. I actually think it's a cooler effect. I don't know if that was intentional. But we have this animation. Oh, was it intentional? Oh, Doreen?
I said I wanted it. I wanted to do it like the original one, but the containers, like I couldn't get
Mm,
the one of this size. I tried large, I
okay.
tried medium, I tried small. Yeah, so I ended up going with medium,
Okay.
which
You know,
gave
you
me
could also
that
always
one.
make your own custom container as well. You don't just have to use the
Oh,
ones. Yeah, you don't. The
okay.
ones from the style guide are like starting points, but you can add more depending on what you need for
Oh,
your web. Yeah.
okay. Nice.
Okay. And then I think this is okay. Yeah. Obviously, this is a very long page. I would have been shocked if you're able to do this whole page, but this
Yeah.
it's very long. But honestly, it's amazing what you were able to do. I love all the different animations and that you tried to use a few different animations. And then the page layout itself, you did a good job of recreating the original concept. So this is great work. Um, I can quickly go over maybe this part, or rather, I guess if it's just an issue with the container, then you would just need to make. So you were using container or container medium. So let's say I wanted a
Yes.
much smaller
Mhm.
container that isn't in the guide. You can call it anything, like you can say maybe small custom or something like that. If it needs to be smaller than the other container, and then you can make it as small as you want, like let's say 45 rem. And now if I preview, so you can see that the text is still kind of overlapping out of the container shell. And that might also be because we don't have overflow hidden on our container. So as these elements move right and left, because this container medium here doesn't have overflow hidden, even the content that is going outside of the boundary will still be shown. However, if we try to set overflow to hidden, for example, and we preview, so now we can see that the content is hidden. It's just that because I think the actual image itself cuts off
The
here.
images,
So it
yes,
seems
they
like,
are cut.
yeah, which is fine. But we can see the difference between when we had overflow visible. So as it was here, it extends way, like I think our container probably ends somewhere here and it's going
Mm-hmm.
way outside. But if we set to overflow hidden to hide any content that goes outside the container, we can see that content is hidden now. So it has that
Yeah.
effect. Yep. But otherwise, great work. Honestly, I
Yes,
don't
I
have
have
any
a
other feedback.
question. The
Yes,
this image, the first on the left.
this one,
No, no. Yes, this one, and the one at the
mm,
hero, the bigger one.
this one, yeah,
Yes. Let's start with this one at the hero. When you look the original one,
oh, the hero.
like on the far right,
Mm-hmm.
there is you see this like the curvy thing. Then there are words. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I tried cover, I tried landscape, I tried portrait, nothing works. I wanted it to appear like this.
What do you mean?
You see how the head
Ah,
is very
yeah,
zoomed. Yeah.
yeah, I get you.
How can you address that?
Let me try and see. Why is it doing that? Mm. Okay, so now I'm just playing around with these different visual um things to see what exactly we need. It is interesting that when we the image itself is actually quite big. I wonder why it's that.
Mm.
I wonder why it's that big. Cover, contain, fill. Okay. So right now the image, so this is like the full size of the image, which seems to be extending way beyond what it should be. And this is already in a grid as well. So let's try making the text and the image equal in terms of 1, 1. And then I can see why you added. Maybe let's try making 100 pH. 100 pH and then fill cover. It might be a situation where the actual and is this image the same one that you took out like directly from okay, I can see it's the same image here.
Yes, yes, yes.
That's so interesting. I think I'll have to play around with it more. I'm curious why it is doing that. It might be a case of like sizing, whatever, because essentially when we use field cover, this is the container we have for our image. And in order to fully cover the container, this is what it has to look like. So I'm wondering why it
Okay.
has to be zoomed in comparison to the original. But I can check that out after. And then when I figure out
Yeah,
why it
sure.
was, I can record and send to you.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Now the
Okay.
second image just below is this one.
Okay. Why it's not extending to the edge?
Yeah, you see, like mine is stretched. I don't know why.
Oh, yours is stretched. Did you set it to
Yes,
cover?
and yes, and if you look like this, uh, on the left of the image there is space, while on the original one there is none.
I think because you have it under padding global. Padding global creates space on the left and the right. So here you put a combo
Okay,
pass of padding left where you set this to 0. So if I remove that,
okay,
you can see it adds that padding again. So we would also have to do the same here and set it to 0.
okay.
So that would eliminate the space here. But then instead of, if you want to then add space for your text and
Mm-hmm.
whatever, you can just select the grid. because I think this text and image are within this grid. So you can select the grid and then add the padding within the grid
Ah,
so it
okay.
doesn't affect this part here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, much
Yeah.
better.
Okay. Any other questions?
No. No, 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 no.
Okay. Great. Good job. Love it. It looks great. I will get back to you on this part, but amazing work. And we can now get started on what we are covering today, which are Webflow forms and symbols and components. So we'll use this page for our Webflow form. Um, Actually, maybe the style guide might be better to use here. So when you copy a style guide, if you have been watching from the initial recordings, it also comes with some where are these? Where are these form? Maybe it doesn't in this one. Rich text. Okay, here. All the way at the bottom, you have some form elements that you can edit. So sometimes it's good to come into the style guide and make these edits because they'll usually put in all the form elements you could possibly have, like specific form elements. So inputs, labels, select fields, checkboxes, radio buttons, and then like the submit button. So these are the main form elements that you can use. Obviously, you can customize a form in any way you want. It's just that normally you use these specific elements, which is why they're here. So going back to, let's go back to week 2 so I can demonstrate how to actually create the form from scratch. So to add a form, you add what is known as a form block. So this is your container that holds your form. So if I click that to add my form block, I can see it's here. And by default, the forms will come with these 5 fields. So these 2 label fields for name and email, input fields, and then the submit button. One thing to keep in mind, and we'll cover this also in a bit, do not confuse the submit button and the regular button. With the submit button, you can see here if it has no class, it says completely that it is a submit button. And when you click into the settings for it, it gives you submit button settings, such as what should the text of the button say. Or when somebody does click submit, there's usually a brief buffering period. So what do you want it to say when it's loading? So in this case, it will say by default, please wait. Compared to a normal button, and they look similar, but when you click the normal button and you go into settings, you can see it just gives you regular link settings. So when you are creating forms, like custom forms, you're usually adding, removing, deleting elements. You might delete the submit button at some point, and later when you want to add it again, don't add a normal button. Make sure to add and you can even see here, it's called a form button. So you add a form button. Otherwise, your form will not work if you add a regular button. So just wanted to make sure I emphasize that. So now that we have our form, if I open my layers panel, so we have our form block, which is what contains the form. You can style it however you want. And then you have the actual form container. So this is the wrapper that you add in your form elements. You cannot move this outside of the form block. Not that you should Chicken, you not that you should want to anyway. You can also not remove or move these elements. So success message and error message, which we'll cover briefly. Basically, these 3 things have to be within the form block. But in terms of what's in the form, you can have anything in a form because a form can be as custom as you want. So for example, if I wanted this paragraph element to be in my form, I could just move that in there. If I wanted, this image to be in my form, I could move that in there. So you can add any other element in a form. The one thing that you also note is that those form elements I mentioned before in the style guide can also only be added in a form wrapper. So for example, if I wanted to add something beneath this heading, so that's outside the form block, right? And I wanted to add, let's say, an input field. It'll tell me I can't because I can only add that in a form. Same with like any of the radio buttons, the checkbox buttons, the form submit button, all those default native form elements, you can only add them within the form. So that is also something to remember. But Webflow will tell you anyway when you try to add it. So with our form, we can customize. Let's say in this case, we want to use these fields. We don't want to change them. But we want to customize them and maybe adjust the styling a bit. So the first thing is field label. For our field label, we have if you go into the style selector, you can see that there's an option for all labels. So you can select that, and then you can customize how you want all the labels to look. Now, keep in mind, labels aren't just for in a form. Normally, that's what you use them for, but you can also use them elsewhere on the page. Like if I type in label here, I can add, oh, okay, field label can only be added in a form. So never mind, they can only be added in forms. So when you go to customize, you can usually just select that global selector known as all labels, and then you can go and change. Let's say we want to make this a bit smaller, like 0.75, or maybe even smaller. And then we want to make it caps lock. Oops, as well. So we can go ahead and do that here. And so that customizes it both for this label as well as this label below. Next thing we have is our text field. So if we wanted to customize our text field, when you click here, you can see there's no global text field class. So you do have to give this a class, or you should give it a class to customize it. As we saw in our style selector, we do have classes already in our style guide. So we can actually just use those existing classes, and they're already customized by default, and then you can just adjust them. So we'll apply that class here and here. So this is the default styling for the class. If I wanted to change it for whatever reason, like maybe I want to make the border a bit darker so you can see it, you can do that, and then it adjusts it for both of them. Another thing with text fields that you can do is when you double click, you can change the settings for the text field. So name is the name of the field. So this is a field for name. So that's why it's called name. Whereas if I click the one for email, it'll be called email. So name is where you can change the name of the field. Type is the type of field this is. So there are plain fields, which is just for like regular text, like if you want somebody to put their name, or if you want them to put, I don't know, what company they work at or what position they have, you would use plain text fields. Email is specifically for email if you want somebody to put in their email address. A password field is for passwords. If you were creating some kind of platform where people needed to sign in or sign up for something, you would use the password field. Phone number is for phone number. And then number is just a regular number. So don't confuse the two. And then URL is if you want somebody to add in a link. The reason it's important to choose the right field is that once you publish your form and it's live, let's say if somebody tries to put um, something that isn't an email in the email field, Webflow will alert them that, hey, you didn't put an email in the email field. But if you just left this as plain and you didn't adjust it, then somebody can put anything they want. So it's important to make sure you're choosing the right type of field so that even when people are filling in their form, if they're not filling it in correctly, they will get an error message so that they can, change what they're filling in. And then you also have placeholder. This is that text that appears in your field to indicate what users should be adding here. So for example, for name, you can just write full name. That could be the placeholder. So the way placeholders work is that when I preview, I can see it says full name. When I click it and I start typing, it disappears because I'm already typing it in. So with placeholders, normally you want to also make the text a bit gray because right now it looks like somebody's already filled in this input field. It's a bit confusing. So we can select our field, and here on this dropdown, we have different states. The state for placeholder is right at the bottom here. You can see placeholder. And then once you're in here, you can adjust what it looks like. So in this case, you can see that the color has been set to this really dark color, which we don't want. We want it to make it a much lighter color like that. Once I'm done, I can go back to my default none state. And then I'm just going to make sure that the text when I am typing in the field is a different color. So I want to make sure that it's black. Now, if I preview, we can see it's gray. And then as I start typing, it turns to black. The other thing that you can also adjust with states is this border. So when I click into this field, for example, we can see that this blue border appears. So and then when you click outside, it disappears. That's also something you can customize. So with my input field selected, I can go into this drop down and I can choose this focused state. This is basically focused as in when you click into the field, you're focused on it. What do you want? What sort of style changes do you want? So if we scroll down, we don't see where it's added the blue. That's really just a default native effect that it normally comes with. But you can actually go in and add a border if you wanted. Like, let's say I wanted it to appear red when I'm in the focus state. And let's say I also wanted to add in transitions. Remember, we covered this before and gave it that kind of transition. Now, when I preview, I can see when I'm focused on this, it goes to red. When I'm not focused on it, it goes back to that gray color. So with our email address selected, let me make sure that I covered all the settings here. Right, forgot. The other two items here you can see is required and autofocus. Required means that this field is required. So somebody has to put in something in here in order to submit the form. So if you have a form where you have to, somebody has to put in their email, has to put in where they work, has to put in what country they live in, you can make all those fields required so they cannot submit the form unless they put in that information. Autofocus basically means sometimes when you open a page, it automatically goes to the form. That's if you want that kind of effect, that's what autofocus means. So it will automatically, once you load the page, it'll highlight the form immediately. So if your form is important and you want to direct the user's attention to it immediately on page load, you can use something like autofocus. If I open up my settings, you can see there's a lot more. So that's why show all settings is important. So under here, form settings, we'll cover the states in a bit, but here you have name. This is the name of the form, just so you don't get confused. This is different from the text field name setting. Here, this is the general form setting. So the name of your form. So is it an email form? You can name it anything you want, subscriber form, I don't know, inquiry form. It basically helps when you are receiving form submissions, you know which form people are filling in, especially if you have more than one form on your page. Here you can see it has form field. So what form field in particular do I have? So when I select this one, it only indicates that I have a name field. But when I select the second one, it shows me, oh, actually, when I select the entire form is when it shows me all the ones that I have. So I have the name field and I have the email field. Here, form submission notifications. This actually I have not used this feature before, but this I think alerts you to who is notified when somebody submits your form. So that could be you. I mean, I'm the owner of this project, so I'll be notified. I could remove myself. I could add more team members if there were any team members. I could put in someone's email manually. So if you want some more than one person to be alerted when you submit a form, I guess they don't need to actually have an account in Webflow. You can just email them those form submissions. So this is actually new for me. I haven't used this feature before. You can also manage notification settings, which then opens up the settings page. So on your project settings, there is a tab for forms where you can fill in even more information. It can be a bit overwhelming, but for the most part, you don't usually change a lot of these. Like by default, Webflow will fill in a lot of this information, but these options are here in case you want to customize how you receive the submissions even further. But we're just going to leave it exactly like that. And it's going to my email, so we can actually test out how it looks like when we submit the form later on. And then connections, unless you're building custom form integrations, you will just normally leave that as it is. And then here, same thing for these options. You would normally leave those as it is unless you're building something more custom. The only thing I will highlight here is this redirect. So normally when you submit a form, it once the user submits the form, it'll open up the success state, which is linked to this success message here, which you can customize. Otherwise, you can also redirect users to a specific page on your website. So you can choose another page and have them redirected to that page. So you can actually build a page specifically to thank people for filling in your form and then redirect them to that page. You can also redirect them to any other URL that you want to by clicking the URL tab. But we're going to use none because we're just going to want to use our default success state. Now, before I show the success and error states, we'll click onto our email. We'll go into our settings. So we can see here, name, email, type email. You can also add in a placeholder here like email address. And we can see that it's required. We'll leave that as it is. And then if we go into our full settings, nothing much is different here. The settings are generally the same for email. I can add in one more field, which is, let's say, a radio field. So we added in a radio field here. So our radio field comes with like three, and this is actually very similar to the checkbox field. So I'll go over this and then you can apply the same thing to the checkbox field. So it has its container here called radio button field, and then it has the actual radio button, and then it has the radio button label. So those are the three fields here. So You can adjust either one accordingly. One thing with checkboxes and radio fields is they have a default styling and a custom styling. If you want the default styling, once I click this, I can go into settings and you can see here the style is set as default. That's fine as well. So I can click this and that's just the default styling that it comes with. That basically means you cannot customize this. It will not change the styling because you have chosen to use default styling. If I click custom, then you can already see the styling starts to change and now I can customize my radio button to look exactly how I want. So in the style guide, as I mentioned, we already have a lot of these default elements. So they're already in my classes. I just need to search for them and pick the right one. So this is the one for the icon. And then there's one for the label, which is that text. And then there's also one for the group that it's in called form radio. So these are my three elements. So let's say for our radio label, you can see it's caps lock because technically radio labels are linked to our field labels, but we can, because it already has its own class, we can customize this more. We can remove that. We can make that a different text, etc. So we can apply that styling. And for our form radio icon, maybe we want to make it a bit larger, like, oops, 1 rem by 1 rem. So it's a bit larger. Now with radio and checkbox elements, there's obviously the state that it's in now, and then there's the state when you click onto it. So right now there's no, actually, I think for checkbox radio, it doesn't show in Webflow. It only shows on the live site. So when you click on the radio icon, you can see here that there's a new state called checked. This is basically how you want it to look when the user clicks on it. So when the user clicks on it right now, it's going to show this blue color with a white circle in the middle. We're not going to change that right now because I don't want to play around with it. So we're going to leave that as it is. That will be our checked state. And then if we go back to none, it'll be as normal. I did mention that you can see when you click here, nothing happens. And that's just because radio field, for whatever reason, don't let you preview how they work in Webflow. You have to publish the site and then preview the changes there. So that's just something to keep in mind. So let's say this radio field is just going to be a yes and no. Because another thing to keep in mind with radio fields is that normally people use them if they're giving someone an option and expecting them to choose one of the options they've given. So are you a member of our group? Yes or no? Or any other type of question. And what you're expecting is that the user will only pick one of the answers. So with radio fields, users can only pick one option. If you want users to pick more than one option, you would use checkboxes. That allows them to pick as many options as they want. But when it comes to styling and everything, it's exactly the same. So the question is, how do you link radio fields together? Because you could have multiple different questions with multiple different radio groups. And you want to make sure that they are grouped together. And by grouped together, I basically mean, let's say, for example, I put these two radios, whoops, in a div block, and I can call this form radio, oops, group. Okay, so it's going to be called form radio group. So this is my first group, and then within this, I'll also add another field label with a question. So let's say the question is, are you a member of our group? That can be the first question. And then I will duplicate this radio group and ask another question, which is, um, I don't want a yes or no question. Let me think of another question that I could ask. When did you join the group? Let's say. Those are the two questions we're going to ask. So in this case, are you a member of our group? We have yes or no. And in this case, we have when did you join our group? We can say before 2024, this year. Those will be our two options. You can add as many options as you want. Like let's say we wanted 4 options like 2020, 2021, oops, 2022, and let's say 2023 are the 4 options that we want. So these groups are separate. We don't want the answers of this to be linked to this. They are separate groups, so we have to separate them accordingly. How do we do that? We select, for example, this radio field and go into settings. And you can see here under radio button field settings, there are options for group name and choice value. Choice value is basically the value of this response. So you can see here we added in yes. That doesn't mean that Webflow automatically recognizes that the value of this response is yes. It just means that you wrote yes in the text. You can add anything you want in the text. You could add a full paragraph in this text, but choice value is what you want to be sent by email as within the responses. So when you're receiving this, you know which option the user picked. Right now, by default, it just says radio, but we're going to change that to yes. You can also access these settings by just clicking the settings icon here. You don't have to open the full panel. And then for group name, that's basically, you can make that the name of your question that you're asking. So are you a member of our group? Or we can just simplify it and say, oops, we'll call this group members, right? So we apply that to that. Now I have to do the same thing for my second response here. You can see the choice value is no. And then our group name has to be the same. That's how we link these radio fields together. So now both of them say members, which means they're associated with each other. When I select no, it won't allow me. Whether I select no or yes, I can only choose one of these two options to answer this question. Second thing we want to ask, actually, the other thing that you also want to keep in mind before I forget is when somebody submits this form, for example, under it'll notify you that somebody has selected a response for members and they've selected yes or no. So if you know what that means and they meaning that it's an indication that they are answering this question, that's fine. If you feel like you might not remember, you can then just add the full question in the name of it. That way, when Webflow sends the form response, it'll also send it with a question, so you have that reference. So that's just something to keep in mind, but we'll just leave that as members. We'll do the same thing for the second question. So we'll call this year and we'll add in all the values. So this is 2020. This will call year and say 2021. This will call year and say 2022. And this will call year and say 2023. Okay, so these are going to be our four different options for year. And that's basically it for radio fields. Like I mentioned, checkbox fields are very similar to it, not that much difference, etc. The last one that I guess I might show here are select fields. I'll actually, yeah, okay. I'll add a field label and then I'll add a select field. Okay. So for my field label, let's just say we want this to be choose a level. Now that we've selected our select field, we can apply styling to it. So you can do custom styling. Webflow also has default styling for select fields. Normally with forms, with select dropdowns in forms on websites rather, they have default styling depending on browser you're using. You can forcibly customize the dropdown like how it appears so that it'll appear a certain way regardless of what browser somebody's in. Normally people don't do that because I mean, it doesn't really matter. But if you have a specific design style you're going for, you can do that. But what we can customize in Webflow is, how this field looks like. So actually, the style guide does come with a specific styling for select fields that you can access. So it's form input, which is the same as this. And then there's a combo class for is select input, meaning that you are specifically customizing this select field. We're not going to change the styling because it's the same as all the other ones. So there's no big difference when it comes to styling a select field. What we are going to go through the settings. So you can see here we have a name, which is the name. What is the name of this select dropdown? So here we can say it's called level because we're asking people to choose their level. Select one, you can see is the default styling. You can actually remove that if you want to pre-select an option. Like if I wanted by default to select, whatever the first option is, I can remove that. But usually people have this as a placeholder to prompt people to select one of the options. So we'll leave that, but we will customize our first choice. We'll say this is beginner. So when you're customizing, there are two options. There's the text value and there's the text option, and then there's a value option. Text basically means what it shows when somebody is looking at the dropdown. They'll see beginner. A value is the value that is then sent to you when somebody submits a form. So you can see that they selected value. Normally, these are the same. But like, for example, if your text value is like a pretty long, like a sentence or two, you don't have to put that as the value response. You can just have the value response be like the first few words because you just want to indicate to yourself what option they selected. You don't need to see the full sentence. But in this case, we're just going to use the same for both. So we'll say beginner, intermediate, and expert. Those will be the options that we have. So here we can say you can actually allow multiple selection, which basically, as you can see, converts it. So now instead of just being a regular select dropdown, it allows me to choose one or more options. That's something you can do, or you can just by default have it be they can only select one. So when I click into this, I can see I can either only choose one of these two options. So this is our form that we're going to be working with. I think these are all the fields that we're going to add. And the last but not least is our submit button, which you can customize any way you want. Like maybe we want to use our button styling for it. That's fine. That's okay. We can just use that as it is and leave it like that. You don't have to apply specific class for form buttons. You just need to make sure that you're using a submit button and not a regular button in here. Now with our form selected, we are almost done. The only thing left to do is to customize the success and the error states. So if I go into my settings, you can see here there's a state option and we have normal, success, and error. So if I go into success, you can see my form disappears. It's still there. It's just that now Webflow is showing you your success state so that you can customize this more. So remember on our layers panel, we had this success message div. So this is what it is. You can give it a class. Your style guide also by default will have styling for form success and error, so you can use those and then customize them further. We're not going to customize it because this looks good enough for us, but you can add anything, literally anything you want in this div. You can't customize this div. For example, you cannot change the display. Like if you wanted it to be a flex or a grid, you can't do that. But you can always add another div in it if you, for example, wanted a grid layout within this message for whatever you were going to put inside it. You can just add another div inside with everything that you want. So that's our success message. And then we're going to customize our error message. So in order to access those settings, you just need to make sure you're selecting either the form or the form block, and then you'll be able to see those dates. So we'll click onto error. So the error message usually appears at the bottom of the form. So we'll select that container and we'll just use our default error styling that came with the styling. The only thing I might change is the size of the text. So it's not that big. Now that that's done, I can go back to normal and then this is our form. So we'll test out our form by publishing. In Webflow, you cannot fill in a form and submit it. You can preview how it works. So for example, let's say I added this in my form and I click submit. You can see it automatically comes with an error. Please include the @ in the email address. So because we selected this as a type field, Webflow knows that it should follow an email format. So if it doesn't follow an email format, then it's gonna alert me. Similarly, I think we set the email as required. So let's say if we fill in everything else, well, we can't do the fields, but that's fine. Let's say we selected everything else and then try to click submit. You'll see Webflow will prompt me to fill in this field because it is required. So you can preview how that works. And then when you're ready to publish, you can publish. So now that it's published, we will preview. And now that we've previewed, we can fill in our form because what I want to do is I want to see, number one, does the form work? Testing your form is very important. And number two, how does the success state appear? Error state is hard to really test because it really depends on whether there's an error. But for the most part, it's not really something that you need to test, but we want to test how the success state appears. And we also want to see how the form submission is sent to my email. So we'll just fill in yes. So you can see now that we're in live mode, we can actually, see how these radio fields work. So we can select these options and then choose this and then click submit. So there's a brief period where there's waiting, and then it lets us know that our form has been submitted. Now, if we go back to our email and we refresh, because I believe the responses should be sent to my email, you can see here we have an email from Webflow form submission. We can click that and it lets me know I got a form submission, lets me know the name of the form that was used, what site, because you could have multiple websites, so what website this is for. And then it gives me the information that was submitted. So the name, I put in Elsa, the email, I put in this email. Remember for members, if I just refresh this, You can see here we have these two options, yes or no, that we grouped together. So Webflow recognized that. So it just tells me yes, because the person, when I filled in the form, I clicked yes. Same thing for the year, we grouped it together and I selected 2021. So that's what it tells me. And then for level, I had selected intermediate. You can see here also at the bottom, it tells me how many submissions I've received. Depending on your Webflow plan, you're limited in how many submissions you can have on your site. So in a month, for example, this is a free plan that I'm on for this project. So I can only get a maximum of 50 submissions. If you wanted more, then you need to upgrade the plan to a paid plan in Webflow. And then that's it. That's how you would be receiving these emails. So you can add more people to be receiving these emails. You can even customize how those emails are received. But otherwise, this is forms. Do we have any questions so far on forms as I grab my charger real quick?
No, I don't have any question.
Okay, let me plug in my laptop. Okay, great. If we don't have any questions for forms, then that is great. We will, in these last few minutes, probably quickly cover, well, we'll start covering components. I don't think we'll finish everything regarding components, but that's okay. We can continue from that next week. So for components, let me see if there's a better page I can work with here. Okay, let's use this page for actually. Let me just see, what did I do for week 7? Okay, we'll use week 6 for components. So really briefly, I'll introduce components and we'll see how much we can cover and then continue from next week. So components are located here on your in your Webflow workspace. You can see how we have no components created. Normally after you create a component, they will all be listed here and you can even see what pages they're used on, etc. But what are components for anyone who is not familiar with the term? They're essentially reusable elements or reusable, yeah, basically usable elements in Webflow. So for example, if on your, let's use this site as a reference, what are common components? Navigation. Navigation is something that you have on every single page on your website. So in order to avoid, and normally you change it continuously. So in order to avoid, let's say I have my navigation on the homepage, I customize it. Then I have to go to the podcast page and customize it. Then I have to go to the chapters. That's very tedious. If you have a website with 100 pages, you cannot go and manually customize your navigation on each page. So what do you use? Use components. Component basically means you have a master. Well, actually, in Webflow, you don't really have a master component, but you have your component and you can add it anywhere on the page. And when you make a change to any instance of that component, that change will be applied to all other similar components on your website. So if this was my navigation and I made changes, like I changed, let's say, the color of this logo in the component, it would apply that change to literally every single other page on this website. So the podcast page, the job board page, whatever other page we have on this website, it would manually update that navigation. So components are very useful in that regard. You use them a lot for navigation. Well, you should use them for navigation rather. You also should use them for footers because these are things that are on every single page of your website. So it's good to just have them as components. Another one that people might use them for are CTA sections. These are usually sections people have if they want to call out a user to do something, like just as a reminder, like, sign up for our newsletter or, subscribe today or request a demo. Like normally, especially for product websites, you have those usually right before the footer. So those can also be components because you normally have that on every page. You don't have to have a component on every single page of your site. That's not a requirement, but you normally use them for elements that you can expect to reuse. So even here in this description, Webflow lets us know components that you reuse designs in your site. How do we create a component? Very easy. Like let's say we want this, yeah, let's say we want this section, this particular grid here to be a component. So the shortcut on your keyboard is Shift Command A on a Mac. I guess on Windows it might be Shift Control A, or you can also right click and then if you go down here, you can see there's an option to create components. When you click create a component, you're going to be prompted to give it a name. So let's say this, we'll just call this grid block. If you have groups, because you can create groups, and these are just so that you can organize your components. If you have hundreds of components, it's good to try and organize them in groups. We don't have any other components, so we're not going to give it a group. And then description, you can add a description. If you have a lot of components, or if multiple people are going to be working on your website, it's helpful to add description so everyone knows, okay, this is what this component does, this is what this component does. We're not going to add a description for now. We'll just click create. So now that I've created my components, if I exit and I go into my layer panel, you can see that it's green. Green indicating that this is a component. And you can also see, we can't see what's in the component. Actually, we can only see the parent layer, which is fine. You just need to double click. Once you double click, you can see the rest of the page gets grayed out and you're now highlighting this component. And if I go back into my layer panel, you can see that I am currently only editing this hero component. So it makes it easier to focus on your component when you're making edits. And then when you're ready to exit out of this state, you can click anywhere on the page and you'll exit it. If we go to our components tab, we can now see that we have this grid block component, and it lets me know one instance. Basically, I've used this component one time in my website. If I used it 5 different times, it will let me know there are 5 instances. When you click this, it actually tell you which pages you have these components on. This is very useful, especially when you have a big site. And let's say there's a component you want to delete. You can actually not delete a component until you have deleted all the times you've used it on your website. So if you have a very big site and you don't know where you've used that component, this is a very useful way because it'll tell you every single page you've used it on and where on the page you've used it on. If I deleted this, for example, it doesn't delete it from here. So it doesn't delete the component. The component is still here. It just lets me know I've used it 0 times. So you also don't have to have the component in your website to use it. You can create components for like different layouts, different structures that you are planning on using, and then keep reusing them, but you don't actually have to have it on the page. So there are a lot of different ways you can use components. It's hard to explain all of them, but I just wanted to highlight that deleting it on the page doesn't mean it's deleted here. If you want to delete it fully, you have to delete it from your website completely. And then you can go in here and then click delete. We're going to undo that because we want to use this component. So within a component, another cool thing is it doesn't have to look the same exactly all the time. So if I, example, had this here and I wanted to duplicate it and have it, let's say I also wanted to add it where, let's say I remove this and I wanted to also add another instance. Actually, I'll remove this too. So I wanted one here and one here. So this is the same component, so they look the same, but they don't have to look the same. You can customize copy. You can customize color too. It's a bit trickier, so we won't go over that. But let's start with the copy. So in this case, this says what happens when a shop and a way of life become one. But let's say I wanted to say something different here. Now, if I go in, right, and I change it like that, you can see that it changes it even in the first one, which is not what we want. We don't want the change to be applied on both. We just want to customize this specific one. So what you need to do is you click onto your component, you select your texts, and then you go into settings. Okay. You want to make sure you can select the bold. You want to make sure you're selecting the paragraph elements. And then you can see here, there are these purple icons. These are basically component, forgot the name for them, properties, component properties that you can create to make sure that your component is different. So I can create a property specifically for the text. So what do? I select that purple icon, create a new property. I can give it a name. I'll just leave it as, I can call it paragraph text. Here's where you indicate, is it a multi-line or a single line? So in this case, it's multi-line, will normally have like more than one line. And then this is the default text, which basically means when somebody adds this component to the page, what is the default text that appears? We'll leave the default text as it is, and then we'll click create. Now you can see there's this purple bar indicating that this is a component property. Now, if I exit out of the page and I select my component, you can see that it comes up with this property tag here and lets me know I can customize the paragraph text for this element. So I can change this to whatever I want, and you can see here, it doesn't affect this original component. Also, if I click the original component here, I can also customize the text. Basically, properties allow you to customize components to make them unique. So the overall design and layout is the same. So for example, if I change this to flex instead of grid, it'll change it on both. but you can choose specific elements and customize them so that you can still make components unique in different ways. We'll stop there for now. We'll continue next week probably on components and how we can use them. But yeah, we'll end things for today. Any questions before we finish things off?
No question.
No questions. Let me stop staring in my screen share. Back to map view. Okay, then amazing. Thank you guys for watching or for joining. Um, Obviously, try out forms, see how they work. You can even try out components if you really want to. Let me know if you have more questions. And next week we will continue learning components as well. But thank you so much for joining. I will stop recording now.